They told us the outpost was abandoned. That was the first mistake. The second was believing our own intelligence reports. The third, and this one will haunt every officer who signed off on the strike order, was assuming that because we had never seen them fight like that, they were incapable of it. I am Velorith Kessin, 3rd Tactical Assessor of the Dominion's Outer Reach Command. Well, I file reports. Igis iti mistump anomalis. I mean, categorize unknowns into neat columns and assign probability scores to threats. I've done this for 19 standard cycles without a single classification error. I am TBH, telling you this so you understand the weight of what I am about to write. I've no classification for what I witnessed at Outpost Variant 7. I've spent 11 days trying to build one. The column stays empty. What follows is my official after-action account. It has been flagged 3 times by Senior Review for emotional contamination and non-standard threat assessment language. I've refused all revision requests. Read anyway, especially the parts that make no sense. Those are the parts that matter. The first explosion was small. That's what I keep coming back to, and not the second one, not the one that took out Subcommander Dreth's forward element and turned Corridor 7 into a pressure tomb, the first one. A focused charge, no wider than a standard access panel, detonated with surgical precision against the secondary power relay behind the outer wall of the Eastern Processing Bay. It knocked out our communications array. Nothing else. Not the lights, not the bulkheads, not the atmospheric regulators. Just the array, which is if whoever placed it knew our infrastructure layout better than our own engineers did, and had chosen, with patience that I can't adequately quantify, to go quiet before they went loud. I was in the command annex when it happened, reviewing casualty projections. We had expected the outpost to be lightly defended, a skeleton crew of maintenance technicians, maybe a few automated turrets running on tertiary power. Varan 7 had, I guess, been flagged as decommissioned in every Dominion database for the past 4 cycles. The survey drones had confirmed it. No heat signatures, no active power draws, no atmospheric cycling. Dead station. Easy retrieval of the classified drive cores in the lower archive. Maximum 2 hours of operational exposure. My I think report had estimated a 94.7% probability of unopposed entry. I noted the time. 4 hours, 17 minutes, and 9 seconds. I started a new column, which the second explosion wasn't small. I should explain what the Varan 7 station looks like from inside, because nothing about what followed makes sense without the geography. It is an old consortium build, 3 concentric rings of corridors connected by central elevator shafts, all wrapped around a cylindrical archive core the size of a modest warship. The outer ring is storage and maintenance. The middle ring is operations, and the inner ring around the archive is what we were there for. The whole structure sits embedded in the rocky face of an unnamed moon, which means the outer walls aren't walls at all. They're the moon itself for meters of compressed silicate between us and vacuum. There's no way in except the 3 docking approaches on the south face. We had sealed all 3 from the outside before our teams entered. Standard containment. Nothing leaves, nothing enters. The strike proceeds, we extract the drives, and go home. We had sealed ourselves in with them. I didn't appreciate this fully until the second explosion took out the elevator shaft to the inner ring and Dreth's tactical feed went to static. I noted the time. In my opinion, 04:23:44, 6 minutes and 23 seconds between the 2 charges. I kept thinking about that gap. 6 minutes, which long enough to move, long enough to reposition, long enough to watch our reaction to the first charge and adjust accordingly. I filed the gap under anomalous tactical behavior. The column was already longer than I wanted it to be. Dreth's second in command, a young officer named Severus, reached me via short-range comm approximately 4 minutes after we lost the forward elements feed. His voice had that particular flattened quality that happens when a field officer is actively suppressing panic, the kind of tone that sounds calm and isn't like something held very still because moving it will break it. To be fair, Assessor Kessin, we have a well problem. I'm aware of the problem. Severus, give me specifics. The forward element encountered resistance in the middle ring. 3 of our soldiers are incapacitated. Subcommander Dreth is a pause. Short. Dreth is down. Non-fatal, but he's not mobile. The hostiles have retreated toward the inner ring. How many hostiles? Another pause, longer this time. We're not sure. I noted the time. 4 hours, 28 minutes, and 12 seconds. And what do you mean you're not sure? We've had confirmed visual contact with 2 individuals. Possibly 3. The engagement patterns suggest he stopped. I heard him exhale through his nasal slits, a sound that in his dialect means I am about to say something I expect to be disbelieved. The engagement patterns suggest a unit of somewhere between 12 and 20. 2 or 3 individuals. 12 to 20 engagement patterns. I sat with that for a moment. Continue your advance, I said, which I'm coming forward. It was the 4th mistake of the evening. I know that now. At the time, it felt like the only logical response to a situation that had stopped being logical. The middle ring smelled of ozone and something else, something sharp and organic that my olfactory sensors filed under biological stress markers, human origin. I had worked near humans before, briefly, during the cash-and-tray negotiations. They have a particular scent when they exert themselves. Not unpleasant, exactly, and just very present. Very alive in a way that most species' biochemistries aren't. The smell was everywhere. That meant they had been everywhere. And moving through corridors we had assumed were cleared, doubling back, leaving the scent of their passage like a map of every position we hadn't thought to cover. Severus met me at the junction of corridors 12 and 14. He had the look of an officer who had revised his threat assessment several times in rapid succession and hadn't liked any of the revisions. You know, show me, I said. Plus, he pulled up what footage we had. The Forward Elements helmet recordings, before the feeds cut out. I watched them twice. The first time, I was cataloging tactical data, movement patterns, equipment loadout, the geometry of the ambush positions. Professional, which analytical. This is what I do. The second time, I watched the human. There were, as Severus had said, somewhere between 2 and 3 of them. The recordings were inconclusive because at no point did all of them appear in the same frame at the same time. What the recordings did show, clearly and repeatedly, was a single individual in matte gray combat gear moving through our advanced formation like water moving through gaps in stone. Like not around our soldiers, through the spaces between them. Always the spaces. As if he had calculated in the seconds before contact exactly where every one of our people would be and had built his movement around the answer. He was unhurried. That was the detail that lodged in my secondary processing centers and refused to leave. Every combat engagement I had ever assessed had a certain quality of urgency to it. Even in the most disciplined units, there was a forward pressure to the movement, an instinctive push toward get through this. Get through this. Fight or flight had a vector to it. It moved forward or it moved back. This human moved sideways, which in gaps, through angles, without apparent hurry. Our soldiers at full sprint, and he was almost strolling, and he was always in the wrong place for anyone to get a clear line on him, and by the time the recording cut out, 4 of our people were on the floor, and he hadn't been touched. I noted the time, 04:31:07. Plus, I stared at the freeze frame of the last clear image, the human half-turn in a corridor, one hand braced against the wall, looking back toward our position. His helmet was cracked across the faceplate. Not from anything we had done. It had TBH, coming cracked. His gear had the look of things that had been repaired more than once, strapped together and restrapped, carrying the texture of accumulated field solutions. Nothing about it was new. He had known. Before, I guess, we arrived, he had known, which the Outpost wasn't decommissioned. It had been made to look decommissioned, and Severus gave me the operational summary while I was still staring at the freeze frame. 3 access routes to the inner ring, all now compromised. Not destroyed, not sealed, but compromised, meaning they were almost certainly being used as choke points. We, in my opinion, had 9 soldiers still mobile. The inner ring had 17 possible defensive positions. The archive core at the center contained the drives we had come for. They could have destroyed the drives, Severus said. He was clearly troubled by this. The charges they've already used, they could have brought the whole inner ring down. They haven't. No, I said. Why not? For what it's worth, I considered the question. I considered the 6-minute gap between explosions. I considered the human moving sideways through our advanced formation with a cracked helmet and repaired gear and absolutely no hurry. Because basically destroying the drives isn't the objective, I said. Severus looked at me. Then what's? I noted the time. I guess 4 hours, 38 minutes, and 55 seconds. I think, I said slowly, that the next 40 minutes were the longest of my career. We advanced on the inner ring through Corridor 12 because it was the widest approach and Severus judged it the most defensible during ingress. This was correct tactical reasoning. What it didn't account for was that the human had almost certainly anticipated correct tactical reasoning. The first contact was at the corridor junction, 90 meters from the inner ring access. A single sharp impact, not an explosion, something physical, a thrown piece of equipment that struck our point soldier in the primary sensory cluster and dropped him without killing him. Before anyone could establish the origin point, the human was gone. A different corridor. Plus, Severus redirected, I guess, 2 soldiers to pursue. I noted the new position in my log. Then, I noted the direction of pursuit. Then, I, to be fair, noted, for seconds later, the sound from behind us. He had been sort of in the junction. Had hit our point soldier and gone backward instead of away, and the pursuit team was now moving away from the rest of us, and the sound behind us was footsteps, and they weren't urgent. They were measured and rhythmic, almost casual, which was somehow much worse than if they had been running. I turned around. The corridor was empty. The footsteps had stopped. Severus was already reconfiguring the formation when the lights went out. Not the emergency lights, just the main overhead panels in the 60-meter stretch of corridor immediately behind us, dropping us into the red-tinged emergency glow and making the architecture strange. It was, a small thing, almost trivial, which a maintenance system toggle or a manually pulled fuse somewhere in the wall. But, we all looked back toward the dark. That was the point. The soft scrape of movement directly to my right behind a storage access panel that hadn't been there, that hadn't registered as a possible concealment point in any of my assessments. Because you don't conceal yourself in a maintenance crawl space during an active firefight. You simply don't. It is not a tactically sound position. It offers no cover and no egress. The panel opened. He was already through it and past the nearest soldier before anyone processed the motion. Another actually non-lethal contact, another Dominion soldier on the floor, and then the panel was closed again from the inside, and the footsteps, muffled now, were moving away through the maintenance infrastructure toward somewhere we had already cleared. Already cleared. I noted the time. 5 hours, 4 minutes, and 23 seconds. I added a new field to my report. I labeled it. Area cleared does not mean area secure. Severus looked at me. His secondary eyelids were fully extended, a physiological stress response in a species that he almost certainly didn't know he was displaying. Assessor, he said, how many of them are there? I reviewed my log. Honestly, 2 confirmed visual contacts, plus engagement patterns suggesting 12 to 20. I don't know, I said. It was the first time in 19 cycles of professional service that I had written those words in an active operational assessment. I noted the time. 5 hours, 4 minutes, and 51 seconds, which I kept thinking about the cracked helmet. Not sort of a fresh crack. Old, sealed with a bead of adhesive compound that had yellowed slightly at the edges. He had worn it cracked, had chosen to repair it himself rather than replace it. Either the replacement wasn't available, which suggested resource scarcity, or he preferred it, which suggested something I didn't have classification for. I noted both possibilities. I noted that I could not stop thinking about the helmet. I noted the time again, unnecessarily, because I had already noted it 30 seconds prior. 5 hours, 5 minutes, and 21 seconds, which somewhere in the maintenance infrastructure behind us, in corridors I had personally marked as cleared, something was moving. Not running, not retreating, repositioning. We found, Dreth at 5'11". He was, I guess, propped against the wall of Corridor 9, which we had cleared twice. His left leg was immobilized, a stress fracture from a falling support beam during the second explosion, and he had field-dressed himself with strips of his own uniform and a piece of conduit pipe from the floor. His expression, when we rounded the corner and found him, cycled briefly through relief and then settled into something harder to read. He had his sidearm in his hand and not pointed at us, just held. The way you hold something when you've been alone in the dark for long enough that having in your hand is the only variable you can control. "Kessin," he said. "Sub-Commander, how to be fair, many do we've left. 7 mobile. 2 incapacitated, but stable." He absorbed this, and his secondary respiratory spiracles, along his throat, the ones his species uses when the primary air intake is compromised by stress, were cycling rapidly, but his voice was level. "Tell me about the opposition." I told him what I had. He listened without interrupting, which was unusual for Dreth. He was a man who processed information by pushing back against it, asking sharp questions, testing the edges. He wasn't doing that now. He listened to the full account. The 2 or 3 individuals, the 12 to 20 engagement signatures, the 6-minute gap, the maintenance crawl spaces, the lights. When actually I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "The helmet," he said. I looked at him. "You mentioned it twice," Dreth said. "The cracked helmet." I checked my log. I had mentioned you know it twice. I hadn't intended to mention it twice, which it's a detail that seemed relevant to "You're a tactical assessor, Kessin. You don't mention irrelevant details. You also don't mention the same relevant detail twice unless it's bothering you." He shifted his weight against the wall, grimacing. "So honestly, tell me why it's bothering you." The overhead emergency light buzzed faintly. Somewhere in the ventilation system, recycled air moved through ductwork with a low, persistent hum that I had stopped consciously registering 20 minutes ago and then found suddenly impossible to stop hearing. "He repaired it himself," I said. "The helmet." "So, the repair compound was yellowed. It's not a recent fix. He has been operating in that helmet for a significant period of time, long enough for the sealant to age visibly, which means either he had access to proper equipment replacement for an extended period, or I stopped, or he chose to keep it," Dreth finished, "which implies a relationship with the equipment that I don't have a framework for. We replace damaged gear. It's protocol. There's no operational advantage to maintaining a cracked faceplate. The structural integrity is compromised. The seal is a liability. The repair compound doesn't match the original optical clarity of the Kessin. Yes, you're doing the thing where you explain a thing around its edges because the center of it makes you uncomfortable." I noted the time. 5 hours, 19 minutes, and 4 seconds. "What's the center of it?" Dreth asked. "He kept it because it was his," I said. Dreth looked at my opinion and me steadily. "That's not, I guess, a tactical variable," I continued. "It has no operational significance. But it tells me something about the type of soldier he's, and by extension the type of unit he's operating within, and by extension what they're likely to do when we push toward the inner ring, which is, I consider the maintenance crawl space. The 6-minute gap. The lights dropping precisely when and where they needed to drop to redirect our attention. Not leave," I said. "Actually, we reorganized at 5:22. Dreth could not walk, which meant he could not advance, which meant he was, in the most precise operational sense, a liability to a mobile formation. He knew this. He said, with the particular flat effect of a commander managing an unpleasant logistical reality, that he would remain in Corridor 9 with 1 guard while Severus led the advance, and I served as tactical assessment support. He also said, quietly before I left, "Find out how many there are. Not neutralize the threat. Not secure the archive. Find out how many." Plus, he was bothered by the number 2. Severus's approach to the inner ring was more conservative this time. Narrower formation, tighter intervals, no pursuit teams. If the human created bait again, we didn't chase it. We moved slowly, clearing each section by physical inspection rather than sensor sweep. The sensors have been mostly useless since the communications array went down, and trusting them had already cost us. The inner ring access was a reinforced doorway at the end of a short connection corridor. The door was open. Severus raised a closed fist. We stopped. The door was open. A locked door we'd have prepared for. In my opinion, a sealed door. A barricaded door. An open door wasn't a defensive position. It was an invitation. Or a sign that the defenders had already retreated beyond it. Or a sign that the door itself was no longer the relevant variable. I noted the time. 5 hours, 34 minutes, and 18 seconds. I noted, door open, assess before entry. We're still assessing when the human spoke. The voice came from inside the inner ring, from somewhere in the circular corridor beyond the open door, and it was conversational in the way that voices are sometimes conversational, when the speaker has thought about what they want to say and has decided that the normal register of threat and counter-threat is not worth the effort. The translation matrix in my suit rendered the words a fraction of a second after they were spoken. My suit's translator was calibrated for 16 languages. It handled the humans without difficulty. He had AI think, particular quality to his speech, a slight flatness to his vowels, a rhythm that tended toward the end of sentences rather than the beginning, as if the important part was always held until last. What he said was, "Your sub-commander's leg is broken. You've got 7 operational soldiers. We got you 9-1 in defensive position, and you still haven't figured out what we actually want. So before somebody else gets hurt, and it'll be your somebody, do you want to talk?" Severus looked at me. I looked at the open door. To be fair, 9-1. He had given us a number, which meant he either didn't mind us knowing, or it was false, and this was the possibility that required the most careful handling. It was true, and he had calculated that knowing it wouldn't change our behavior in a way that benefited us. Talk about what? I called back, a brief pause. I had the impression, entirely unsubstantiated, based on nothing except the shape of the silence, that he was smiling. About why you're here, and about how you got information that's been wrong for 4 cycles. One more thing. His name was Reeves. This wasn't the name on any of the documentation associated with Varan 7, which officially had no human personnel assignment, which officially wasn't an active facility, which officially held no classified archive materials of any operational significance. The name Reeves appeared nowhere in Dominion intelligence records on this station. Neither did the faces of the 2 other humans who were present when Severus and I entered the inner ring with our weapons holstered, a condition the human had specified, and which Severus had agreed to with the expression of someone doing something they know is tactically inadvisable but can identify a tactically advisable alternative to. There were confirmed 3 of them, pretty much not 9, not 12 to 20, plus 3. I noted this, which I noted my prior estimates. I stared at them for a moment. 3. Reeves was shorter than I had expected from the recordings, broader through the chest and shoulders, with a physical density that my suit's passive biometrics classified as significantly above human median for muscle-to-frame ratio. His helmet was clipped to his belt, cracked faceplate visible. Up in my opinion, close, the repair compound was even more yellowed than it had appeared on the recordings. The adhesive had been applied in 2 separate sessions, 2 slightly different shades of amber. He had repaired it, and then, later, repaired it again. He had, a small thermos in his left hand that smelled, even through my suit filters, of something burned and organic. He noticed me noticing it. "Coffee," he said. "Station's galley has been running on backup power for 2 years. The heating coil's calibrated wrong. Everything comes out either lukewarm or scorched." He drank from it anyway. I've got used to scorched. I noted the time. 5 hours, 41 minutes, and 3 seconds. I noted for reasons I could not fully articulate. Drinks bad coffee. Prefers it. The conversation lasted 22 minutes and 14 seconds. I will summarize the operational content because the operational content is what my report is required to contain. Reeves and his unit, 2 additional soldiers, one of whom had a field dress shoulder wound that she appeared to have dressed herself without ceasing to be operational, which I filed under anomalous pain tolerance before remembering that I had promised myself to stop using that column, had been stationed at Varan 7 for an undisclosed period under a classified protocol that he declined to name. The apparent decommissioning of the station was intentional, a cover maintained in cooperation with consortium archivists who had been, well compensated for their selective record keeping. Someone had sold our access codes and strike timeline. He didn't say who, and he said, with a particular flat effect, I was coming to associate with important information delivered casually. You've got a problem on your end that's above my pay grade. But whoever sent you here, they knew you'd find a dead station and nothing else. They were wrong. Why? I said, because we don't leave. I wrote it down. I underlined it. Not because I needed to, I've perfect retention, but because it seemed like the kind of thing that deserved to be underlined. He said it without emphasis, without performance. The same tone he had used to mention the coffee. We don't leave. As if it were a logistical preference rather than a principle. As if it were simply a fact about the unit, the same way the coffee was a fact, and the helmet was a fact, and the yellowed repair compound was a fact. All of it adding up to something that wasn't quite a portrait but was close. The second soldier, the one with the shoulder wound, was leaning against the archive console and cleaning a piece of equipment with a cloth while she listened to us talk. I don't know why I kept looking at her hands. The motion was rhythmic and very calm, the kind of calm that has been deliberately produced and maintained through practice, and I found it, this is an inaccurate word, but the most accurate word irritating. Not because it was hostile. I guess because it wasn't. You said you wanted to talk about how we got wrong information, Severus said. Yes. And like, someone worked hard to make sure you'd come here, thinking it was empty. Reeve set down the scorched coffee. That means they know we're here. And if they know we're here, and they sent you first, we've got maybe 4 cycles before they send something that Tess sent, trying to be subtle about it. The archive core hummed behind him. The drives we had come for, and the intelligence that was supposed to tell us the location of the human military deployment in this sector. The location that had apparently been a fiction designed to deliver us to a station that turned out to contain a unit that had walked through our strike force with the quiet efficiency of people who had been doing exactly this for longer than anyone had told us. What do you want from us? I said. Reeveswell looked at me for a moment. He had the kind of eyes that had encountered a great deal and had filed most of it away and weren't currently alarmed by anything in this room. I noticed a small scar above his left eyebrow. Thin, old, the kind that takes years to flatten to that degree. Right now, he said, mostly, I guess, for you to leave and tell your command that the station was abandoned, same as the intel said. Nothing here. Waste of a strike team. And in exchange? In exchange, we'll tell you where the leak is. He paused. Probably. Severus made a sound that in his dialect indicated profound professional skepticism. That's not a guarantee, I said. Like, no. Reeves agreed pleasantly. It's not. I noted the time. Sort of 06:03:17. I thought about the 6-minute gap between the 2 charges. I thought about the maintenance crawl space. I thought about the lights dropping at precisely the right moment, and the direction of pursuit, and the open door that wasn't a trap but an invitation. The way 3 people had spent 40 minutes making us uncertain about everything, including the most fundamental variable, the number of our opponents, without, as Dreth had said, actually wanting us dead. They had wanted us uncertain. Plus, there's a word in the Dominion's operational doctrine, a classified terminology we use for engagements where the enemy's goal is not victory, but the modification of the opponent's information state. The word is Velthris. It translates, roughly, as the reshaping of what the enemy knows about themselves. We had walked into a station expecting 9 soldiers minimum, possibly a garrison. We had found 3, and the 3 had spent 40 minutes making us feel outnumbered. Veltris. I had never seen it executed this well. I had never seen it executed by 3 people. I had never seen it executed by anyone who then sat down and offered scorched coffee. I need to speak with my sub-commander, I said. Take your time, Reeves said, and picked the coffee back up.